For many years, I was part of a church culture in the Bible Belt in the southern state of North Carolina that employed an attractional / traditional approach to ministry. I want to make it clear that I love some tradition. I think we have been informed by the traditions of the church, and especially the traditions of the church year and the church calendar. I also want to make it clear that I don't see anything inherently wrong with attracting people together with a really good service. I'm a big advocate of having good worship services and gatherings and doing things right. But the culture that I was part of, that I grew up in, for too long, I believe, they relied on programs and uniformity to determine their worth. In other words, if we can put on the best program in town, we can draw more consumers than the church down the road. And instead of seeing opportunities for partnership with other Christian entities in the same community, it became more of a competition. And when I say uniformity often determine their worth, what I mean is that we like people to get in a row, to line up, to look the same. And you see, the tradition of the local church, in many instances, like I'm describing to you here, it stems from an extremely internal focus. These churches master the art of entertainment. They're extremely predictable. I mean, you know what's going to happen week in and week out. And the attractional model, it excels in some areas. It excels in pastoral service and edifying believers and taking care of our own. But where it fails is paying little to no attention to what's happening outside the four church walls. Paying little to no attention to what's going on in their own neighborhoods, in their own backyards. And in many cases, these congregations become sectarian. In other words, they are in the world, but they're not engaged in the redemption of the world. They've discovered that if they implement the right programs, that their year-end statistics will make them feel really good about what they're doing. I mean, their attendance numbers and their offering numbers will make them feel really good about everything they've accomplished that year. And so they'll just keep circling the wagon. Now, over the past decade, maybe a little longer, I've picked up on this shift, and a lot of people have, in the traditional understanding of mission. And more than ever, the church is demonstrating an understanding that the size of the congregation, has nothing to do with its ability to focus on mission, to focus beyond its walls, beyond itself, and to become authentically a missional expression in its own community. And that can be done whether your average church attendance is 20 or 2,500. It doesn't matter. Now, as my local congregation engaged in an intentional, externally focused paradigm, they organically, naturally begin to transition from an attractional to a missional ministry model. I mean, we went from people signing up to sing in the choir to people signing up to go serve a meal at the rescue mission. And serving those meals at the rescue mission became just as important as singing in the choir. Taking the youth on a trip to an inner city neighborhood and developing relationships with people, and kids hanging out with teens at inner city churches and developing relationships and offering tutoring programs and building relationships with kids and families and single moms and guys getting out of prison trying to earn their GED. Those things became just as important as anything happening inside the walls of the local church. Now, ultimately, the goal of that mindset was for it to spill over into individuals' lives. Because, again, this is about who we are more than it is about what we do. Now, as the understanding of what it meant to be the church shifted in my local setting, I anticipated leading the congregation to a deeper awareness of what it means to live missionally, intentionally missionally. And the intent was to develop a lifestyle of sacrificial service, a lifestyle of one being willing to empty themselves, of downward mobility, if you will. And that becomes a new way of living in the world. And as time passed, that missional language became ingrained in the life of that local church. And it changed everything. It literally changed everything. Now, developing this type of atmosphere includes speaking a missional language. Much of what you're learning in this class, it includes you being willing to go back to your local setting and speak this language with wisdom. With wisdom. I mean, you don't want to come out and just say, hey, we're changing everything. We're not going to focus on stuff in the church anymore. No. Small steps. Small steps. Remember, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Let's call it a missional marathon. It's not a sprint. And as time passes, and you speak this missional language, and you develop relationships with people in your church and people in your community, the language becomes more ingrained in the DNA of the church. Developing this type of atmosphere includes developing a rhythm that is externally focused. And in that externally focused rhythm, people will find purpose, they will create identity, it will build momentum, and it will lead congregations into a new, unified future. Now, this lifestyle I'm talking about, it encourages individuals to literally become the body of Christ by volunteering their time beyond the walls of the local assembly, by being purposefully involved with agencies in the community where they're in relationships. I spend as much time going to lunch and developing relationships with the president of the Raleigh Rescue Mission and the leader of Neighbor to Neighbor outreach ministry and other leaders of these ministries in the local community as I did my own staff. And when that begins to happen, a new identity begins to emerge. This shift requires the church to remove itself from being the central focus to allowing itself and all of its internal trappings to be replaced by a new way of thinking, a kingdom way of thinking. In other words, the Missio Dei includes much more than we have traditionally realized. And transitioning from an internal to an external focus, it requires that we realign the way we think about church. I'm going to be praying for you guys this week as you immerse yourselves in a new way of thinking about what it means to be the church.